stroke.
£6,000 a stroke, it's almost worth having it, isn't it?
Yes. Some people pay £6,000.
I think so, yes. He's going to grow up to lead the Conservative Party, isn't he?
Yes. I'd like to say to Mr. Braithwaite that I'd be willing to settle out of court if he gives me my bottle of Cresta back from about 1974.
What flavour was it?
Strawberry.
You remember these things, didn't you?
Yes.
What was his name?
Mr. Braithwaite.
Mr. Braithwaite, you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
I don't understand the clip, though, because that can't be a public school, because there's a boy kissing a girl.
I think that's what he was beaten for.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
If you don't nip that sort of thing in the bud, it spreads like wildfire.
Yes, it's true. Yes, it is former public school boy Matthew Prince, who this week received £8,000 government compensation at the European Court for being beaten at school. The beating was said to have left a number of 6-inch wheals on the boy's buttocks. What did he beat him with, a stagecoach? Ian and Sandy, what's this daily upheaval?
Ah, this is Sac Monty. It's the Mirror. They're even writing in headlines. And this is Mirror in headless reader shock.
The Mirror, after Maxwell wanted to find someone sort of really sensible to take over, so they appointed someone from one of Murdoch's papers.
He's a man with a swimming certificate, which is rather...
He's slightly overqualified for the job, then.
Now, he's promised that it will remain a left-wing paper, so he's locked out the workers, sacked most of them, kicked out 2 editors and refused to recognise the union.
And it looks like he's going to win because Neil Kinnock is now supporting the journalists, and so it looks like it's all over for them, really.
Yes, it's a kiss of death, really, isn't it? Yes, it is the new regime at the Daily Mirror, consisting of former Murdoch men, David Banks and David Montgomery. There are now fears that the Sun influence may bring the Mirror down market. Big banner headlines, naked women, mindless trivia. What a traumatic change that'll make. Mr. Banks said, today we finally bury Maxwell at the Daily Mirror. So who was that fat git on the Mount of Olives? David and Nick... David? Sorry.
I don't mind being called David.
No, I'll call you Nick. David
Bob.
Burton. And it's going totally well so far.
I think we've lost them.
No. There we go. Cue Angus, thank you. Paul and Nick, a day in a sporting life for you.
Yeah, it looks like Chelsea v Sheffield United to me. Probably looks like group sex to David Miller.
Yes.
Oh, the last of the Mohicans.
That's Vinnie Jones, obviously, who was previously in trouble for grabbing Paul Gascoigne by the brains. And he got fined this week for his Hard Men video. That's right.
That's right, yeah.
£20,000.
But it doesn't. They said it doesn't matter if he doesn't pay it himself, as long as somebody pays it. Then that's fine. I mean, that should sort of like, if you get sort of 5 years for burglary, like, you don't have to go to prison as long as somebody does. And you could nominate somebody. You could say, I nominate Bamber Gascoigne. And he has to go to prison for 5 years.
I think
It's like the Arms for Iraq case. Those 4 ministers nominated the bloke at Matrix Churchill. You go to jail, mate.
Yes,
I
it
was
is.
fined £20,000 once for contempt of court.
I can hardly believe it.
It's amazing. It was by an Attorney General, the same sort of Attorney General that signed all those public interest orders. What a... Oh.
What a cad, yes. What
a coincidence. The 20s, the figures.
He's on his high horse,
He's on his high horse.
Yeah, he is.
He's entitled to
Calm
be.
down.
I'm not saying anything. I don't want the Attorney General on my back. Well...
What did you say that was so contemptuous?
I don't think I'll repeat it.
Do it in mime. Is it a book? Robert Maxwell falling off a boat, explosion.
Yes, I think we can guess the rest of it. It's hard man Vinnie Jones, who was fined £20,000 by the FA this week for taking part in a video about dirty tricks in soccer. Wimbledon chairman Sam Haman complained this has only happened because it's Vinnie Jones. Yes, that's because most players tend to come out of a tackle with the ball, not their opponent's left leg between their teeth. It's certainly somewhat alarming to see him treat the Chelsea goalkeeper like this, especially when you consider Jones was actually playing for Chelsea at the time. Which disreputable behaviour means the end of round 1 and the current state of play. is that both teams seem to have got off to an equally flying start, so Ian and Sandy and Paul and Nick both have a rampant 4.
It's not much of a defence to say this only happened because he's Vinnie Jones. I mean, that's like saying at the outbreak of the Second World War, it's only happening because he's Adolf Hitler, isn't it?
It didn't work anyway, because he got fined £20,000.
Well, Hitler did. I'm not surprised the trouble he caused. It was a ruddy nuisance.
And so with the game in mid-flow, we like to bring everything to an abrupt halt as we sow the slightly baffling seeds of our caption competition. Ian and Sandy, here's yours. Paul and Nick,
Dear.
that's for you. And in moments of sporadic inertia, feel free to jot down any captions that may tickle your combined ribs. In the meantime, let's stumble legless into round 2 as we seek to identify the unfeasible stories that succeeded the following headlines. Paul, beware Curry's disease.
Is this mad cow's disease? It's named Curry's disease after Edwina Curry because she once complained that people in the north didn't eat a balanced diet, and apparently if you eat all the wrong kind of food it makes you very ill, and it's been sort of dubbed Curry's disease.
A perfect answer. And joke-free as well, which is excellent. It is an illness which doctors...
Oh, well, I'll do it again with a joke, all right?
Yeah.
Is this the thing where Edwina Curry sort of, said people in the north, there's this Irishman, Englishman in Scotland...
It's an illness which doctors have named Curry's complaint after Edwina Curry. Other diseases are thought to include the inability to see figures, that's Lamont's lurgy. Then there's excessive virility, that's Thatcher's disease. And of course, Major's malady, that's a sudden loss of memory, particularly with regard to defence documents. Nick, practically amusing pun for you. To whom it may concern.
Right, this is either the perennial letter sent to dead person headline, or it's Susan Hampshire's shopping list. And it actually says 2 tins of plum tomatoes and a packet of crunchy nut cornflakes.
Good dyslexic gag.
Yeah.
I was going to be Michael Hasseltime, I wasn't sure.
No.
One or the other.
It's Susan Hampshire, you're fine. Not contemporary, but good.
Yeah.
Isn't it a dyslexic gag?
It's a postman near Basingstoke, in fact, who was astonished when he had to deliver 9 letters to corpses at a graveyard asking permission to inspect their tombs. Would have been all right, but 3 of them actually said yes. One of the letters to Mr. Robert Longman arrived 177 years late. That'll teach them to send it second class. The council spokeswoman said we might start sending letters to lampposts next. Sounds like European Drugs Week arrived early in Basingstoke. Sandy, what adds naked spice to army life?
Oh, golly. Are they teaching some of the men to salute without their hands? I don't know.
Well, in a manner of speaking, I suppose yes.
Oh, really?
Somewhere to keep their caps, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It was the curious ploy.
Is this the thing where they hide pornographic magazines in the terrain and with sort of like fake bombs inside them?
Damn. Yes, unfortunately it is. It was a curious ploy to test the resolve of our soldiery in mock battles by littering the battlefield with girly mags to see how many troops would be distracted. As it turned out, army chiefs were unable to tell how many succumbed, as apparently nothing came up in the debriefing afterwards. Probably a sign that most of them did then in that case. According to a spokesman for the magazine, all the top brass read Penthouse. We know as we've had lots of letters from them. That'll be in the Brigadier's Wives section, no doubt.
So did the Earth move for you on that particular manoeuvre?
Yes, I told you it'd make you go blind.
Yes.
And finally in this round, Ian, a curious image for you. Japanese up to their eyes in jewels from the sewers.
Oh, I did read this. The Japanese, they've developed a range of jewellery from human excrement.
Yeah, they got the idea from Gerald Ratner, didn't they?
It is. It's the Tokyo Metropolitan Sewage Bureau who have discovered they can make. Yes, it does exist. Make jewellery from human waste or dewatered sludge, as it's known after treatment. It doesn't have quite the same ring to it, does it? Dewatered sludge items are a girl's best friend. The idea originally came from a bureau worker who was apparently struck by the lustre of slag. Yes, I think Sir Alan Green knows the feeling. They also.
Oh dear. Poor old Sir Alan. He prosecuted me once.
I think it's a shame to drag up the fact that the former Director of Public Prosecutions, because everybody's forgotten that he picked up women from King's Cross.
Yeah.
Curb crawling,
wasn't it?
while he
Yes.
was in office. I mean, everybody's forgotten that now.
Yeah.
There's no need to drag Sir Alan Green's name through the earrings.
No.
Any man's allowed to make a mistake for 50 quid.
50 quid, is it? They also make vases out of this sludge stuff. Just don't try adding water unless you want a pile of something rather unpleasant sitting on your mantelpiece. Sludge can be used as well to make paper, greetings cards and envelopes, just so long as they don't use it to make stamps, that's all I think. Which bizarre life of human waste brings us to the end of this round, and I'm bound to say that, well, Ian and Sandy have a rather below par 7, and Paul and Nick have a simply top hole 10. Traditionally, this is the point where we'd like to play our archive round, and being sticklers for old values, that's exactly what we're going to do. Ian and Sandy, a time-honoured What Happened Next for you from all of 6 months ago.
It's the ladies. Why is it coming out the ladies' toilet? They are. Well, he made a speech.
Good answer.
Did he ask for that bald bloke's wife's phone number?
It's a malicious rumour, Nick. I think that's the one where he made a speech about drought and being careful about water and couldn't be heard because it was raining so hard.
Well, let's press the play button.
Hear it on the tent.
Unlimited supplies of water for any purpose at any time and in any place for that matter can no longer be taken simply for granted. Water is arguably the most vital of all our natural resources, and in many areas we are using it in ways which are quite clearly unsustainable. It's certainly unsustainable trying to speak.
Yes.
What a funny guy.
Yes, it's Prince Charles acting as an inadvertent rainmaker by banging on about the drought in May of this year, since when the rains hardly stopped. Amateur weather forecasters had predicted a record-breaking hot summer on the ground that moles were preparing for one. Even now, large numbers of drowned moles can be seen floating downstream wearing tiny beach hats and Hawaiian shirts. Paul and Nick, another What Happened Next for you of equally youthful vintage.
Well, they were always going to. There was never going to be any question about that because 10 of them at least actually actively wanted an economic and monetary union. There was never any question of Britain's being able to stop that. Nobody could have stopped that. Mrs. Thatcher couldn't have stopped that herself.
You remember those drums a couple of weeks ago that we saw from 1956 that were going, one of them goes past him. It just hasn't been stopped in the last 30 years is the basic thrust of my answer.
Yes, so let's learn the truth.
Many, many countries wanted it, and therefore the best that Britain was ever going to be able to get was some form of opt-out. Now, what Mr. Major and Mr. in the Chancellor of the Exchequer's name escaped me in the freezing cold.
Yes, it was John Simpson of BBC News forgetting who Norman Lamont was. Would that we all could. Had it been John Cole, he would have remembered. We just wouldn't have been able to work out what the rest of the sentence was. And at the end of all that, that means a look at all this. And let me tell you that Ian and Sandy have a largely laughable 9. And Paul and Nick have a hugely impressive 10. And so we lunge headfirst into our quarterly odd one out round for Innocents Abroad. Which one is the Alan Clark? Paul, the usual likely foursome for you. Linford Christie, Screaming Lord Such, Jonathan Guinness, and the captain of the Titanic.
Is this something to do with being in trouble with the police or something?
Sadly, nowhere near the truth at all.
Is it something to do with records? Is it Linford Christie is a record holder in Guinness Book of Records, and Lord Such possibly has the record for being the biggest git in politics?
Oh, that's very unfair.
No, the most...
A number of other names spring to mind. One beginning with M-A-J-O-R.
It's not quite that simple, unfortunately. It is Linford Christie, I have to tell you, as all the others have had a beer named after them, whereas Linford Christie has only had a lunchbox named after him. That's if anyone actually eats a sausage and 2 Scotch eggs for lunch anymore. The captain of the Titanic gave his name to a beer. That must be an advertiser's dream. Sink a Titanic tonight. Goes down in seconds. Captain Smith and the Titanic's crew went down with the ship, and to steady the nerves of his men, he shouted to them to be British. Not sure what that meant. Nowadays it would mean drinking 10 pints of lager, throwing up a curry and dropping your trousers at the female passengers. Nick, your odd bedfellows are Henry Ford, President Ford, Ron Todd, and Sandy Shaw.
Oh dear.
Can we play our Joker?
I don't know, Sandy Shaw doesn't wear shoes. That's the only thing I know about any of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Did the other 3 ever work in Dulces at all?
Yeah.
A Saturday job, maybe?
Yeah. The other 3's real names are Freeman, Hardy and Willis.
That's it.
Henry Ford worked in Fords.
Very good.
And Ron Todd is to do with motoring.
Worked in Fords.
Yes.
Probably
And
at Dagenham.
Sandy Shaw used to sort spark plugs.
Well, I can't...
Singing Chassis on a String.
Yes, I'll give you 2 points of that, is that they've all worked at Ford's except President Ford, who never worked for them. Henry Ford, he obviously gave his name to the car, although fortunately he chose to give it its second name, otherwise you'd have half of Essex driving around in Henry Escorts. Sandy, 4 elegant glamour pussies for you. Princess Michael, Alessandra Mussolini, Katie Boyle, and Bernard Manning.
Well, one of them isn't a fascist, but I wouldn't like to say which one.
Princess Michael of Kent's father was Baron Obengruppe von Reibnitzschen.
Alessandro Mussolini's father ran a rather nice little delicatessen, actually.
Wasn't Katie Boyle's dad sympathetic, and somebody sympathetic to the Nazi
A
cause?
little bit of a brown shirt.
Yes, and Bernard Manning's the odd one out because all the others have sort of...
I think I'll have to share the points here. Yes, 1 point apiece.
Why?
Because he actually got the right odd one out and you got the right reason. They're all the children of Nazis except Bernard Manning, although Manning is on record as saying, "I'm an admirer of Hitler. Immigrants should not come into our country. We have a bath every day and we do not eat beetles or anything like that. We eat rice pudding, we eat potato hash, we eat hot pot." Yes, and in his case, all in one bowl. As an hors d'oeuvre. And Katie Boyle is the daughter of a fascist and was originally called Caterina Irena Elena Maria Imperiale di Francavia. I think that's the entire Von Trapp family from The Sound of Music. I wonder who came up with the idea of changing all that to Boyle. And finally, Ian, your incredible hunks are Tom Cruise, John Travolta, Mrs. Thatcher's advisor Sir Alan Walters, and Bart Simpson.
Bart Simpson's very sound on economic policy. The only thing I know about John Travolta is he's a Scientologist.
Yes.
Bart Simpson is the odd one out because he's not a Scientologist, as far as we know.
I'll certainly give you 1 point for getting the right reason.
Is it Bart Simpson, the odd one out?
Oddly enough, that's just what they said, actually, Paul, but I'm not going to give you any more marks than I did then. It's Alan Walters.
Who does your hair?
Bart Simpson.
Donald, do you know him?
No. I thought it might be Dewhurst.
Oh, right.
That's Eric, all right. Is Eric
He's
all
very
right?
well, very well. Yeah.
You should have Eric on the show, you know.
He's coming on next week.
Is he? I'll
Yeah.
look forward to it.
Yeah.
Is Hattie coming on?
I hope not. She's been dead 8 years.
Bless them all. The answer is Sir Alan Walters, as all the others are members of the religious sect known as Scientology, where members for £10,000 can learn about the sacred scriptures and the galactic ruler Xenu. For £10,000, I'd want to meet him. Tom Cruise joined the sect because he said it gives me tools to use to be the person I want to be. Or should that be, it gives me persons to use to be the tool I want to be. The woman behind the voice of Bart Simpson is also a member of this sect. Sir Alan Walters, on the other hand, has nothing to do with such an absurd religious sect, preferring as he did to belong to an organisation funded by the Moonies. However, unfazed, he said, I do not judge people according to their beliefs, but according to their actions. So obviously duping and brainwashing gullible teenagers is okay then. After all, Mrs. Thatcher did it to the rest of the country for 10 years, all of which loony business marks an end to this otherwise enjoyable round. And plainly, well, Paul and Nick are very much in the relegation zone now with 11, and Ian and Sandy must be surely champions-elect with 13. And so we slither vulgarly into our final missing words round, 2 clutches of headlines, each with a salient word or 3 forcibly extracted. Losers lead off, so Paul and Nick, prepare yourselves. Dinner guest Hasseltine walks into what?
Mineshaft.
Lion's Den.
Lion's Den, extraordinary, well done, very good. Next, my father never gave me any what, says Blandford.
Is it lip?
Decent Coke.
Love? Affection?
Almost.
Lindisfarne LPs?
You were nearer with love and affection. Hugs is actually the right. I'll give you 1 for love and affection. Next, Princess calls on who to show love?
Blandford's father? Parents?
Ford Fiesta.
Parents, I think you said, is the right answer. And lastly, Lamont relaxes with a what?
Limbo dancer?
With a cyanide capsule.
None of these things. The answer is, in fact, yippee. Rather
You said
strange.
yippee?
Did you?
Said
When did you
yippee.
say
Play
said
it back.
yippee.
I said yippee.
Yeah, you
Okay,
say yippee.
we'll spool back and check on that. Ian and Sandy, your turn now to be interrupted. Fergie to stage what at the Palace?
Fat ass spectacular.
It could be,
Or
but
it
that's
could
not
be
what
a
she's
revival
chosen
of
to call it.
Fanny by Gaslight.
On the same sorts of
A
lines.
lovely old
Topless
Victorian
book
play.
signing.
Christmas thrash. Next, speculation grows over Mrs. Clinton's what?
Husband.
No.
Roll.
Dead body.
A dead heat, actually, so I won't give any points to either of you. Next, PM to reward Norm with what?
Proper job.
Proper job is pretty close. It's half, you've got half of it.
Job paid in Deutschmarks.
No. I can't listen to any more. It's Herd's job is the answer. And lastly, dancing milk bottles win what?
Part in cereal.
Is it?
Very good. With the answer,
No, it's advertising. They won the main press campaign.
it is in fact Advert Award, the answer, so well done. Which random and largely inaccurate shots in the dark act as a final salute to this exhilarating exercise, all carried off with military imprecision. And the sorry story is that this week's caged hamsters are Paul and Nick with 16, and this week's Pet Shop Boys are Ian and Sandy with 18. So the crown jewels to our winners, Ratner's bangle to our losers. But before the demands for a recount are finally dismissed, we have to cast a cursory eye over our caption competition. Ian and Sandy, this was yours, I believe.
All right, one at a time. Who came into the brothel first?
Policeman says, God, I wouldn't like 4 of them swimming up my arse.
French sheep in unusually strong protest.
Very good. Paul and Nick, what do you think of for yours?
Here's 2 things you can catch VD off.
Oh dear, Bango, our chances of ever getting on the show.
I always said anything with a hole will do.
On which uplifting note, we say thank you to our panellists, Ian Hislop and Sandi Toksvig, Paul Merton and Nick Hancock. And I leave you with news that John Pertwee has finally found a new job. He's going to replace the Andrex puppy. Boxer Chris Eubank denies allegations that he's suffering from a drink problem. And finally, in Croatia, army chiefs find it hard to disguise their reactions as Keith Chegwin is sent out to entertain the troops. Good night.